Who in this room doesn't know who Jim Mathews is and represents? Mathews is a lifelong train traveler with a deep-rooted vision for a robust national passenger train network within the U.S. He believes rail can be an economic engine in the communities it serves, potential transformative mode in an ever-changing transportation landscape, and the most environmentally responsible way to meet the transportation challenges of the 21st century. As a volunteer, Mathews served on the Amtrak Customer Advisory Committee for 6 years, including 2 years leading the committee as chairman.
Thank you so much for that. I am very, very sorry that I couldn't be there in person. I would have really enjoyed that. A lot of folks in the room I know and folks online. But thanks for having me. And I'm going to go fairly quickly. But my message to you, the short version of my message to you is keep going, keep it up. As Derek said earlier, you have done phenomenal work in Wisconsin, and we need it to keep going because, especially now with the way that the bipartisan infrastructure law is structured, the action really does shift to the states and to the local communities. The way I described it earlier this year to our elected council was that, you know, if this is sort of the World Series, we've played the home games in DC, and now we're playing the road games out in the states. And as you've heard really throughout the morning, quarter ID projects and all those grant applications, they're originating at the local level. They're getting support at the local level. And one of the ways they get selected is by showing that support at the local level. As Scott said, yes, I do like to say that passenger rail is wildly profitable. It's just not profitable for the operator, but it's true. Our economic benefits research shows a lot of the same kinds of numbers that Scott just quoted to you, that you get back 4 times, 6 times, 7 times, even 11 times what you spend on it in the form of economic benefits, jobs, attracting private capital development, and so forth. That's really why you do it. We support passenger rail with government funds because it creates the preconditions for the success of private capital. And as I said, what we have now is a moment where all of the work that we've done in the past few years to get the bipartisan infrastructure law passed, now we have to make all of that come true, and it happens at the state level and the county level, the local level. And that's why I keep hammering on this message, and have been all year, that it is now time for local advocates to really shine. And I'm going to ask you to make common cause with chambers of commerce, with tourism organizations, visit blank community, those kinds of folks, the destination marketers, the people who are trying to bring folks in, to go to the Dells or something like that. I mean, those are really natural allies, and of course the real estate developers as well. All of you need to come together as a community to help to support the next round of applications for these new grant programs. Just to put this in perspective, the green bars will show you how much money there is available right now compared with the blue bars, which was the amount of money in the previous 5-year period. And in the previous 5-year period, we wanted more, but it wasn't a bad period of time for passenger rail investment. So this really, to my mind, takes all the excuses off the table. There's now money, there's political support, there's bipartisan interest, I'll call it nonpartisan interest. It really is, the time really is now. I like to show this slide whenever we have these conversations. We hear the number a lot, 66 billion for passenger rail. We started repeating it over and over. We often forget about the $36 billion available on top of it based on appropriations. Now, it doesn't mean that we will get all of that. The 66 billion was guaranteed. The 36 billion has to go through the appropriation cycle. But we've gotten a little bit of that so far. And where we are in the cycle right now, that $66 billion is more like $70 billion that's actually available to spend on passenger rail capital investment. And the slide here shows you sort of the buckets into which that falls. But you'll see that the bulk of this funding is sitting in a grant program called the Federal State Partnership for Intercity Passenger Rail, And that's $36 billion guaranteed, and then another $7.5 billion possible over the 5-year period of the bill. That's where all of these applications are being made. And that is where we can really push for local support to get those projects done. So I won't go through this again, except to note that the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Program, the CRISI grant, the first round of CRISI grants under this new program was announced just a couple of weeks ago. And there was definitely some winners and losers. The Gulf Coast restoration down in the Southeast was sort of the big winner, the headline winner, 178 million. And with that last CRISI injection, we'll be able to see that service open up sometime next year. Fed State, as you heard earlier, we're waiting probably end of November. We'll see some announcements about Fed State. And that's going to be really exciting to see. And we'll all have to recognize that if you didn't make the first round, you could always make the second round. And we'll have to just keep that cadence going of pushing communities to apply and reapply and re-justify what they're trying to do. So I just wanted to touch quickly. We tallied up expressions of interest of 111 corridors around the country. Gulf Coast, Meridian, Dallas. We got some non-traditional players on the list this time. Texas, Georgia, Kansas, Oklahoma, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming. Really fascinating, and it's cool to see them kind of raise their hands. But as Derek noted earlier, when there's federal money out there, a lot of folks come out of the woodwork, but when it comes time to committing some matching funds, we may see that change. One of our big tasks as advocates is going to be not just encouraging those who have filed to kind of keep their spine and move forward, but also to partner with other folks in our states and in our regions that are working on innovative funding mechanisms so that number doesn't become an obstacle to moving forward. So I'm going to skip very quickly through some of these examples, but I like to use them only because, you know, you're already super familiar with the Hiawatha and what it can do. But this is true around the country. If you look at, say, Virginia, which in many ways has been a model for the rest of the country in terms of passenger rail investment and growth, $1.4 billion in economic returns to the Commonwealth of Virginia from the extended Virginia service on the Northeast Corridor. It's a remarkable number. It's also, I hate to use this term, but it is profitable above the rail. About $17.58 per passenger in 2018 before the pandemic. The Downeaster, another tremendous success story, fairly short route, but the money that's been spent on the Downeaster buys $5 million in goods from across the state, brings 100,000 annual visitors to Maine, $29 million in tourism revenue, and it has attracted private capital development and investment along the route. And so this is the economic engine piece of these projects that we're all trying to advance. Gulf Coast, we've talked about that. That's a game changer. That's a game changer. We're going to see the annual GDP to the state of Mississippi alone go up $282 million potentially because of this Gulf Coast service. Total economic output could be as much as $486 million. And when you compare that to the relatively small capital investments and operating expenses you're going to have for this route, that just shows you why this is benefit to all of us. The I-20 corridor between Meridian, Mississippi and Marshall, Texas, what you've done when you do that is you sort of close the gap, and that gap actually links 110 million people. So the number of trips and the number of potential trips that opens up is pretty enormous. And we will see, again, many, many multiples of what's spent on it in the form of returns, taxes, sales taxes, tourism spending, all the rest. I wanted to touch on the long distance study. We are, as an association, we are participating pretty heavily in the long distance study. We have been at all the workshops. We have worked with FRA before the study began to kind of outline the shape of it. And we helped to write the provision in the bipartisan infrastructure law that led to the study. What we're seeing, we're about halfway through the process right now. We have another 2 sets of workshops to go. But this is going to be another game changer. This is a 52% increase in rural access to long distance service around the country, 22% increase in the access to educational institutions. So you heard Lisa Stern talk about her son getting ready to go to college. That's a perfect example. A lot of people use that. And we're now looking at more than 600 educational institutions that would be reachable by train once the enhanced map that's emerging from this long distance study were to be implemented. Major medical centers, 15% increase, on and on and on. This is a perfect example of investing in the entire country in a way that will benefit the entire country. This is the conceptual enhanced network that is emerging from the long distance study. And the green lines that you see here, these are all the potential new segments that would be available on this enhanced map. These are not routes, these are segments. The next round of workshops, we will be using these segments to sort of construct the ideal flow of those routes, the ideal alignments. So this is really conceptual, but take a look at the density of service that you see here across the country on this map. It's a pretty remarkable map, and it really does bring American rail service more in line with really what it should be. We've done polling at the association. We found that we have broad bipartisan support for passenger rail investment, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. Most Americans want more and better trains to more places for more people. 78% support passenger rail, including 61% of Republicans. 57% support high-speed rail. 60% would spend $100 billion or more on a sustained basis to bring passenger rail up to snuff in the United States. This is an incredibly strong public support for what we are all trying to do. And the fact that it is broadly bipartisan, I'm going to go back to the very beginning of this meeting where we talk about how, in theory, we don't even need to talk about the names of the parties, because this is an issue that all of us really can get together on. And as advocates, you really should kind of stick to that script, because the fact is that regardless of the party, this is about benefits to the communities that you serve. Are there some obstacles? Yes, there are. We don't have enough rolling stock for today or for the future. There are programs underway. The Aero program is very exciting. We took part as an association in many of the design walkthroughs on the interiors to try to make those more passenger friendly and ADA accessible. So they're doing a great job. But the fact is we just do not have the capacity in the United States to build enough coaches, enough sleepers, enough locomotives to support what we're all trying to do. Siemens' backlog right now is 10 years long, and they're building a brand new plant just to catch up to that backlog. We are very, very short of equipment in the United States, and we could point fingers as to why we got here, but the fact is that here in 2023, as we approach 2024, what we need to do is to work together as advocates to find ways to accelerate the production of equipment and to spread out the capacity throughout the United States so that we aren't waiting 10 years to get new rolling stock. Another obstacle, running out the clock. We all know that freight train interference can be a major problem. It is the lion's share of delays on the Amtrak network right now. Fortunate in Wisconsin that you have a lot of exposure with CPKC. Canadian Pacific is a really good passenger-oriented host railroad compared with some of the others. But still, this is the kind of thing that could trip us up. If we continue to have profound delays on the system, you begin to diminish the attractiveness of rail investment to the folks who we really need to vote for it and sustain it. The freight railroads are waging what I call lawfare against the new performance rules, the metrics and standards, which passed in 2020. We still don't have any long distance trains today that actually meet the on-time performance standard. There's a very important case working its way through the Surface Transportation Board right now between Amtrak and Union Pacific. Anybody who cares about on-time trains, you do care about that case, even though it's the Sunset Limited and it's way south of Wisconsin. It is going to make an enormous difference to on-time performance throughout the system, depending on how that ruling goes. So to summarize, we have an incredible moment here. Money's no longer an excuse. Time's no longer an excuse. Political will is no longer an excuse. Americans have said repeatedly that they want this. They have voted for it consistently. The bipartisan infrastructure law makes it possible. The public must insist on real and speedy execution. We do not have any more time to waste, and the voices of advocates like you will make the difference. As I said, the move is now out of Washington and into the states and into the communities, and this is where you guys do your best work. So that's really what I have for today. So thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks, Jim. Great message. And I don't know if you were able to hear it, but you got a real hearty round of applause at the end of your presentation there. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there.
Oh, well, I think we have a room of what, about 35 people here that would like to see you come next year. And they're all going to take you to the Harley plant and to the Sprecher Brewery. And I see hands going up as I throw things up here. So you'd have a lot of friends and acquaintances that would be willing to host you.
I'd be happy to. Thanks a lot. And it'll be fun to see Derek and Scott and everybody in person.